Mark Cheddar's my neighbor. I see him walking sometimes.
Do you know that you're still recording, Sonia?
Yeah, I started.
Okay.
I started this one just, you know, just in case. No. You are good to go.
Okay. Well, we would like to thank Lori for coming and speaking to it. Well, being virtual and speaking to us today. Lori Snider is widely regarded as one of the best sales and service trainers in multifamily real estate. A professional speaker, author, and marketing strategist, Lori is a frequent and requested national conference presenter, and she is regularly sought for her keen insight regarding sales and marketing trends. Her enthusiasm, sales skills, and imaginative problem-solving abilities are contagious, and her creative capabilities can take a company from average to exceptional. Lori's workshops and keynotes are packed with real-life experiences that thousands have related to, and her sense of humor makes sessions fun and interesting. Lori is a repeat presenter of the National Apartment Association Education Conference, AA Conference, National Association of Home Builders Builders Show, MFE Conference, multifamily brainstorming sessions, and has been interviewed and authored numerous articles for the multifamily industry, including Multifamily Executive and Units magazines. Lori co-founded a boutique marketing and design firm that served the real estate industry and has executed marketing strategies for a myriad of product types throughout the country. Lori resides in Denver with her husband, Tom, their sons, and 2 Australian Shepherds. We'd like to thank Lori and turn the time over to her.
Thank you so much. Yay, what a nice introduction. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to our new virtual reality. And we're going to talk today about culture in this virtual reality and what we can do and how we can nurture it. And to get started, one of the first things I wanted to let you know is that if you need me, please don't hesitate to contact me at Snider@redpeak.com. I'm very happy to always discuss anything that has to do with culture, team building, engagement, and those kinds of things. And I know it's a tough time right now because keeping people engaged is of top priority, and yet it's probably one of the most difficult things we do. You know, it's a term, culture is really a term that's been thrown around a lot in today's professional world. And you know, I think that it's thrown around so much that it's kind of lost its luster. It's sort of lost its true meaning. And, you know, if you think of you, even if you think of your company as like boring, maintaining a good culture is a great way to reinforce image and elevate morale and even increase profits. So, you know, how does that come together? Every year, Thanksgiving is my holiday. I love the day. I love serving dinner to everyone that I love. I love that it's the one holiday that everybody celebrates, and I love to entertain and make it special. I usually have between 15 and 20 people show up at my house, all from a wide variety of backgrounds. Some are family, some aren't. They come from out of state. And so what I envision every year, starting about right now, is a happy house full of love and a big old plump turkey and cohesion and harmony. And I want to do it better than anyone else. And that's why I start planning in September. And I try to be ready when something hits us out of the blue and some wacky family member, you know, decides to let their 12-year-old, you know, drink beer, or that, you know, we've got an unhappy family that shows up, or somebody decides that it's, you know, a good idea to dress their child like a turkey and bring them along. So I try to have some fun with it, and I try to change it up, but families are families, right? You know, what's that song? Family is family in church or in prison. And so, you know, you have to kind of go with it and let them be them while trying to manage this big event. And so this really is me thinking about Thanksgiving. The planning is huge because I want to make sure everyone's expectations of a fabulous holiday are lived up to. It's a lot of work, but the days become epic and it can be really super rewarding. And so in the same vein, it's the same with culture. We need to set up the environment for success. That starts with culture and 3 elements. And a great culture doesn't just happen. This is all premeditated and it's all planned. So these are the kinds of things you can do where you're doing the work ahead of time. I want you to think in terms of pre-board, first day, and 30 days and beyond. Because if you can break it down, because it seems like such a big thing. Oh man, how do we manage the culture, right? Pre-board, what's happening before they join us. First day, really important, big day, you can make it or break it, and 30 days and beyond. And then we have to think about the 8 elements to culture, okay? And so there is number 1, there are rewards. How are people recognized within the organization? There are things like structure. That would be the decision-making process and the power structure that makes that process. How are things done? You know, what are the sequence of activities? Then we talk about hiring and exit. So we think about that like bookends, okay? And then the front end, the back end, and all the experience in the middle. And then we talk about our capabilities. What do we do? Where is the training to support our actual capabilities? And then what kind of physical workspace do we create for people? Do we create a different kind of environment? What kind of physical workspace? And then communication. That would be all internal communication, video, newsletters, friendly reminders, and then training content. And then we also have the resources at the top of that. And in the middle, we've got, you know, our values, company, and purpose. So you got to think about that. If you want to take a picture of that, it's kind of nice because it kind of breaks down the elements of culture so that we can better understand what we're dealing with. Now, I think about a triple T approach to culture. And when I think about my triple T and the things that I keep my eyes on when we're thinking about do we have a thriving culture, I look for trust, I look for tradition, and I look at team. So
Hey,
when I
Lori,
do a litmus, go ahead.
so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that you are sharing your notes and everything. I didn't know if you wanted to just be sharing your.
All right. Well, we'll just. Where's my screen? Well, thanks. But that's cool. Let's see. If we go, let's try this one, and we'll try that and see if that works. Did it work? Wait. Is that better?
Yep, there you go.
Okay. Well, now you can actually see the actual screen, right? Rather than what in the world is she talking about? What is that all about? So basically, do they trust that the company is going to do right for them, right? Do people trust the company itself? Do they trust their employees? Is there a healthy amount of tradition within the organization, right? Unique to your company. Are traditions celebrated, and are they shared with new team members? And really, do new team members show the ropes on that? And then, does the team feel part of something bigger? Okay, so when we're thinking about team, we want to think about, does the team feel part of something bigger? Are they able to feel the character of the organization? And are your micro cultures, which means your individual offices or your individual communities, are they encouraging that? Okay, so then, if I could make the slide go, we want to think first about trust. Okay, so this is really hard for some people to get their heads around, because trust is really about letting up on the rules and focusing on principles, okay? A rule, by definition, is a description of what can and can't be done. A principle is actually guidance for getting off to a great start. So, for an example, I have we use a system called Threads Culture, and that's our performance management system. And in Threads, you're supposed to put feedback for people, and so they encourage it, right? And you're supposed to go write feedback, and it can be good, it can be constructive, most of it's really good. And we were finding that we didn't have a lot of people putting feedback in. And so one suggestion was made that we should mandate it and put it on the audit. And I about blew a gasket because you can't mandate feedback, right? Because then it becomes forced feedback and it becomes insincere. So that would be a really good example of how we tried to take what should be a principle. This is how we apply feedback in this organization. We want you to give feedback and then make it a rule. Try to make it a rule, which would have completely destroyed the intent of the entire initiative. Okay, so rule is a description of what can and can't be done. Principle is guidance for getting off to a great start. Okay, so important to think about that. And in the absence of principles, rules will take hold. Okay, so for example, there was this story about Blockbuster, and it was interesting because they, remember Blockbuster, long time ago, Blockbuster Video, remember all driving up there? And they had this problem with clerks that were really chatty, they thought, because things were taking too long. People were taking too long to get to the lines. So what they did is they gave all the people a script, and it totally backfired. And so you can't, what's the principle? Be nice to people? Or is the rule follow the script? You know, and what impact does that have on the people that are serving every day and the people that are being served? I think a good way to really think about a principle and a rule is when people start rolling their eyes over certain rules that may have taken it too far, that maybe should be a principle. And I can give an example here too of shopping reports. I don't believe in scripts for phone because I think every person is different. I think that every person should be dealt with differently. A conversation can't be scripted. And yet I believe in providing guidelines, right? And things you can ask and questions to ask, but I don't think it can be scripted. And a lot of the times if we're measured to that script, then you're just determining whether or not they're doing the script. You're not determining whether they're connecting with customers, because the principle is to connect with the customer. Okay, so important to think about what are our principles, and have we really taken that to, are we even sharing our principles with people, or are we just making a bunch of rules for them to follow? Values really aren't posters you hang on the wall. They are what people do every single day. Facebook's values, for example, are very simple. They're be bold, focus on intent, move fast, be open, build social values, okay? Good values should force you to make a trade-off. And one thing to think about here is whether or not you actually afford or in the position to be able to change that. You want to make sure your values are aligned, right, with the expectation you're delivering. And so if that isn't the case, then we probably want to think about that. And should that really be our value anymore? Or do they need to change? Sometimes they do. People don't care about the company they work for, they care about the team that they work for. And a positive company culture will really equal engagement that enables results. And sometimes I think people will confuse engagement with happiness. Here's the thing, I can't control your happiness. That's a choice, right? Are you engaged? Are you delivering results, right? There's a book called 9 Lives About Work, and it's really good if you want to read more about culture, okay? And you want to learn a little bit more about culture. But in 9 Lives About Work, they talk about the fact that people don't leave companies, they leave their bosses, okay? And that it's not about the company they're leaving, they leave the microculture that they're in. And it's important to think about the little microcultures that you have, because that's where the action's really happening. That's where people really determine what it's really like to work in your company, okay? We can say all these wonderful things and we can actually be all these wonderful things. But if we're working in a community that is toxic and you all have have known that, right? Like I can walk into any community in the country today and I can go, ooh, something is not good here. I can smell something funky because you know people aren't happy. And so they're probably not aligned to the values of the organization. People aren't being treated in a principle-based environment. And so that's where you're going to find that funk. One thing that I really work on is finding the funk in the organization. I hate it when people say, oh, RedPeak's got such a great culture. They've got a great culture. I'm like, you know what? The culture is moving and changing all the time. And I can't keep a pulse on it, right? And I know that at any given time, there's probably a little funk brewing somewhere. And it's my job to find that funk and eradicate it, right? Before it infests the entire household, as in the case of this shoe, right? So we want to think about where's that funk in our organization? Where's that funk in my community, right? And then we want to think about the fact that culture really is about the people. The people in your organization create the culture, period. Whether that is good or bad, they create it. You declare the vision, okay? You declare that vision and they define and live it. So here's one thing I want you to do. I want you to stop interviewing for a cultural fit. Will they fit the culture? And I want you to start asking the question, what can you contribute to our culture? How will this person contribute to our culture? How will they be an active culture carrier for the organization? They create the special sauce, okay? They create it. You provide the ingredients and you let them go. Create a gumbo, okay? So it's important to really think about that, right? It's all moving, it's changing. No two gumbos, any two communities are gonna be the same. They're not, but they're probably gonna be real flavorful and they're gonna have some commonality because they have the same ingredients. So I want you to think about that with culture. And then in identifying trouble, if you're looking for the toxicity in your culture, you wanna think about toxicity can be created by a lack of trust. So at its foundation, fear itself, I'm afraid, leads to distrust, and distrust leads to micromanaging. That funk likely is caused by toxicity created by a lack of trust, okay? So look for the fear if you want to find the funk. Where are people afraid? Where are people not speaking up? Where are people, not, how do you find fear? You find fear through looking for answers. Where are people not providing feedback platforms? Where are people indicating they're afraid, right? Or this company isn't the same as it's always been. Those are the kinds of things you think about. The other one is stagnancy. I can't even say it. Stagnancy. So stagnancy is another source of funk. So just because people have been in a role for a very long time and they happen to be good humans, doesn't mean they're good or effective. And we make this mistake a lot. Well, they've been here forever. They're good humans. They're good people, right? That doesn't mean they're good or effective. Stagnancy actually leads to allowing bad behavior or complacent behavior to continue. And an overwhelming and exhausting resistance to change is usually the outcome of that. So we want to look for the toxicity. Who's toxic? Where's the fear? Find the fear. And then the stagnancy. Who's been hanging around? Okay. So here are some questions that you can ask to determine this. So if people are toxic, okay, that means I have a lack of trust, which is driven by fear. Okay, so I got a lack of trust driven by fear. What are my culture carriers afraid of? What are they afraid of? Okay, the next one would be, are my people nice or are they good? If I had to describe my people, would I say they are good, right? Or would I say they're nice, good humans? Okay, do we experience a bigger than normal resistance to change on the project and initiative level. This is a really big indicator of stagnancy. You get a lot of pushback on anything you try to execute, right? Like, we're going to go forward, and all we get is pushbacks on the brakes, on the brakes. You know, that can be a real indicator that there's quite a bit of stagnancy within the organization. Are the microcultures delivering an experience that is truthful to the culture? Okay, this is who we say we are. We say at RedPeak, for example, family is priority. Are we really making family priority? Are they allowed to be with their families? Are they allowed to work remotely if they need to right now, right? Are we really being authentic to that claim? Because if not, that's where the distrust comes in. You say you're one thing, you're really another, okay? Do we tolerate complacent behavior longer than we should? Lots of companies have this challenge, but do we tolerate that complacent behavior way longer than we should? All right, so let's stop here for a second. Okay, I want to see if there's any questions. I'm going to just do this. Which webinar is this? Okay, you're in culture. Okay, that was last time. That's next. That's it for right now. But does anybody have any questions at all that they'd like to ask at this point yet? Because this is kind of some deep stuff, and I want to make sure that we're setting it up right for you. Okay, I'm going to assume you don't. All right, assume we're good. Okay, so how do we do this? Okay, how do we change the way that people perceive the organization once we've identified those behaviors, right? Like, we've identified, yep, we've looked for the toxicity, we've looked for the stagnancy. These are the eyes I got to keep my funk on. How do I grow that culture? Okay, how do I grow it? So one of the things you always want to do is think about social and web presence. I was on a call this morning for a multifamily executive panel, and the first thing that the president talked about was the social and web presence that they have, that they've really worked on Glassdoor, and that they've done these things through COVID to be attractive, right, to positive people. So let's say that we're an individual and we're considering a job change. What do we do? Well, the first thing we do is we go online and we look at websites, right? And then we look probably at Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever we can go to get a little bit of the flavor of the company. And so you might find that people do scavenger hunts, they're having fun, they're doing different things, they learn. And we might see that you can have this, is the best, mirror on the wall, who's the largest closets of them all. We actually had a company copy us, which was great. But just cute when companies start copying, that's a good thing. And then Glassdoor, one of the things, 76% of people research a company online before considering any new job. 83% of job seekers base their decision on company reviews. And 46% weigh a company's reputation before accepting a job. So if your reputation is in the hole in Glassdoor, you are probably not seeing the best quality candidate, because people who are engaged and not toxic want to work for really good companies. Show people your people, okay? Show the people your people, okay? And it's important to think about, like, what is the flavor of your service team? What is the flavor of our leasing teams? How do we roll? You know, like, one of the things I'll always say if I'm trying to promote a position in leasing is that we don't do scripts. We don't do scripts. We want you to be yourself. And so that's going to appeal to a certain person who's really probably going to flourish in my environment. So you got to think about that messaging. Remember, we talked about pre-board on first day and the rest of the tenure. But this is really important to set that up, because as we're looking to attract the right person, we want to make sure that we're setting them up with a true flavor of our organization. No fake, no fake. You can't be faking this, because they're going to get in and find out you were lying. And that's not what we want to do. And then we do things like, we'll send them things. This is what we do for our new people. We actually send them a whole box before the day they start, saying, hey, we're so excited. You're coming on board. We're excited to have you. And so we kind of keep that little romance going in between hire and then their first day, so that we keep that brand image going for them, and they're excited to be there. We try to provide a great day one. One real quick thing we do is we'll try to do like a phone call from the supervisor, say, hey, just so you know, this is where you're going to go tomorrow morning. And at 10 o'clock, this is where you're going to be. And you're going to park here and you're going to wear this. So you feel like this is cool for you, right? This is how we roll at RedPeak. So you want to make sure, some people put signs out front, welcome, Judy, we're so excited to have you today, right? Have some fun. And then remind the team that they're starting, you know, and we always, one company, they did this that I know of, they do an email on their first day of 2 truths and a lie. And that's kind of fun. So they do this whole thing. This is 2 truths about this person, and this is a lie, which it is. And they let everybody guess. And it's just a great way to welcome a client or a new resident. And then the thing to think about with new hire is that it's not onboarding is not orientation. Onboarding is a process. New hire orientation is an event. Onboarding lasts for quite some time, and it's going to be different for every single person. Onboarding generally lasts about 6 months because it takes that long for people to truly know the job, right? So you have to be flexible in your approach, particularly now, right? So how can we be flexible in making sure that that person is onboarded correctly? So the biggest challenge that we have, I think, is a lack of team. And I think because sometimes we're short-staffed, especially when we bring on a new person, we end up throwing them right into it because we have to. And it's kind of like we push them into the deep end and hope they can swim. And so we have to work consciously to try to avoid that. So it's about getting flexible in like, okay, this is the position type. This is a maintenance team member. How can we make sure that their onboarding is impactful, and encouraging and involving all the members, your culture carriers, in that process to make sure they feel supported. We have location challenges at some property management companies where, you know, you have one little outlier in Grand Junction, right? And so how is this person being onboarded? We have to consider that. We don't start anybody at RedPeak Monday or Tuesdays, because we feel like Monday and Tuesday are so busy that it doesn't make sense to start them on a Monday morning because we're just trying to catch up on a Monday morning. We consciously think about language barriers and how we're going to deal with that. And now with COVID, you know, it's all gone virtual. How do we still maintain that connection and encourage that engagement that's become so much part of the special sauce, and yet we can't be together? So what kinds of things can we do? 54% of new hires report experiencing at least one mishap when starting a new job. Things like technology isn't set up. Necessary supplies aren't provided. Nobody bothered to clean out the desk before they showed up. They didn't receive an overview of the company or know where any of the policies are. They didn't get introduced to coworkers. They were just kind of thrown in. They didn't even receive a tour of the office, which is sort of sad. But, you know, think about that after your first day. When somebody goes home and they're like, how was your first day? And it's like, well, I don't know. I couldn't even get my laptop to work, and then they hadn't really set me up on anything yet, so I couldn't get in. And I opened the email, and there were 4,000 emails there. So one thing I noticed when I first started at RedPeak 5 years ago was that we had we were very ambitious in getting people set up in email. So when somebody got hired, we would get them all set up, and it was great. And sometimes they wouldn't start for another week or 2 weeks. And then they would come into our office, and on their first day, they'd open up their email, and there would be like, you know, 1,500 emails sitting there because they'd just been dumping in there for, 2 weeks. And it was so overwhelming to the poor team member. And I said, just hit it all and hit delete, start over, because there's no point. You don't know what you're doing. And so you think about those little triggers that just either say, we know what we're doing and we've got you, or we don't know what we're doing and you're in for a ride, right? And so you want to think about, what did people say after that first day when they went home? Did they say, well, half the stuff broke, or did they say something else? One of the things, there's a company called Gusto. It's here in Denver, and I have a neighbor whose daughter works there. And one of the things that they did on their first day is they actually have all of their team members that were involved in the hiring process come online or go in person, and they or call them, right, telling them why they knew they would be a great fit at Gusto. So how easy would that be to have the hiring managers all call that new team member and say, you know what, I knew you'd be a great fit because I really like your personality and you're so likable, right? Easy stuff, doesn't cost anything, takes commitment, and again, it takes planning and energy. But the end result is that at the end, wow, right? Wow, I think this was a great decision to be here. Wow, if they're sitting down at dinner after their first day and they're like, I think I made a great decision, it's so much better than if we hear that was a cluster, or other than the fact that nobody was there to let me in and they forgot I was coming, it was nice, or went pretty slow. I filled out paperwork and sat through a webinar on mold. Right? And so we have to think about, how do we get to that place where we're like, wow, I think I'm really going to like working here. What do we need to do? How do we need to plan? How do we need to execute like I execute Thanksgiving dinner? At the most basic level, people typically spend money on two things. It's either they really spend money to combat pain, or they spend money to pursue pleasure, because everything's about pain or pleasure, okay? And so if we're talking about buying into learning, you know, every decision a new hire makes means starting to address their pain, okay? And then helping them pursue that pleasure. So right now, what I'd like you to do, for those of you that are on today, is I'd like you to think about, just for a second, where are the pain points? Where are the pain points for an individual that has started in your organization? I'd like some pain points. You got to think about this. Identify those pain points. Okay, let's identify a few pain points that our team members have every day. What are the pain points that are causing this? And it doesn't necessarily have to be new people. It can be things that are happening. Where are those pain points? Can't say something like technology. You got to get to the specific. Okay, so where are those pain points? And if you'd love to share, I'd love to hear some of your stuff. So I'm going to give you a second and take a little sip of my lemonade icy because it's very hot outside. Don't be afraid to share with me. I really miss you all in this virtual world that I'm in. Okay, so if we're not going to share, which is totally cool, I want you to please write down a few pain points, because that's the start to addressing some of these issues. And then we have to think about, like, what do we really need as it pertains to onboarding a new team member? What do we really need? What kind of content do we really need? What's important? I've found in my past that we either have companies that have way too much content that they're trying to share, you know, a dissertation with people in a matter of 2 straight days, or we don't have enough. And then they get pieces and then they can't put it all together. It's very difficult for them to put it all together. So what kind of content do we really need? And who's going to create it? Who's going to deliver it? Who's going to help this person? What is the process framework for onboarding? What's the process there? And then who's in charge of what? And then here's the most important thing. With impact, what impact are you hoping to achieve? What's the desired outcome? Because truthfully, after onboarding, they're not going to be trained up. They're going to have been introduced to things, and now they have to practice, and that's where learning transfer really occurs. So when you have somebody come back from training and they're like, well, they should be trained up, they're not trained up. They've learned a new set of skills, but now they have to practice them. And so that's where our individual community managers really are important, because they've got to help them. They've got to help them practice. You know, today we have an 8.25% attention span. Okay, 8.25 second attention span. And that means every 8 seconds you're all gone. And then you come back a little bit and I might have you for another 8.25 seconds. So, you know, the average office worker actually checks their inbox 30 times per hour. Okay, 30 times per hour. So when you think about how much we're doing this all day long, we have to think about attention spans. And the only way we can do that if we're helping people, right? And if we're creating that culture that's nurturing and supportive is to cut it, chunk it, and change it up. The goal is really to get away from spraying that fire hose of information at our new team members. And maybe it's about having an orientation and then follow it with a drip campaign that, you know, reinforces little things that they learned in that orientation. Also have them work with different people if you can within your organization, because different people learn different ways. I've tried a drip campaign for new hires. That can help because you can, we were finding that nobody knew that we had a sabbatical after 10 years, right? And even though I know for a fact that they were introduced to this in Welcome to RedPeak, they were introduced to it in a couple other ways. And so what I did is I'm like, it's because they're getting too much information. They're just not able to retain it all. So we basically broke it down. And after a Welcome to RedPeak, I would send out little things. So just so you remember, we do have a 10-year sabbatical here and you get 3 weeks. And I know that's a long way away, but keep it in mind, you know, for a rainy day and you can daydream about it. And that seems to help retention. The other thing to think about is to resist temptation to get them out of your office. And this is really about when you say, go shop your comps because we have nothing else for you to do, or go get lost on the property. I had a supervisor tell me that one time. They always told people, go get lost on the property. I'm like, go get lost. You're not telling them what to do. You're telling them to get lost. And so, you know, there has to be context around why you're asking them to do something. When you send them out to shop a comp, it's really about telling me, what did you learn? I need 3 practices that you're going to follow and 3 practices you never will when you come back. Go get lost on the property means I need you to look at this, 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 and this, right? Because these are going to be important for your jobs. And the worst one of all is we'll have him spend the day on compliance training. Okay, what is that? We cannot put someone in front of a laptop for an entire day and have them look at a fair housing, mold, and sexual harassment video series. Nothing will be retained and they will be crying at the end of the day. So think about what we do in our effort to manage it and how that might be hurting or hindering the way that our culture is fostering this new person. Make sure you're socializing your new people. Right now it's so hard because we're socializing and yet we're not. And we've done some scavenger hunts, and I'm sure you all have ideas as to what you've done culturally with people. But the biggest thing we have to remember is that especially when somebody new comes on, they don't know anybody. And so we have to work extra hard to incorporate them into the organization and into the culture that you're trying to foster. And that means double time. That means assigning them buddies. That means assigning more mentors. That means the effort to introduce them individually to as many different people as possible. And that will help continue that culture, and they'll get that feeling of what it's all about. One of the things that was kind of cool, this is an example of a company on the East Coast that actually provided a new hire guidebook to people. And what they did is it's not an employee handbook. They basically had team members write down places that they love to eat, where they would grab a beer in the neighborhood, what the transit options are, right? Like, don't ever wear this or you get yelled at, kind of stuff. And so that can be a really fun way to introduce people to an organization, especially right now during COVID. And it's just a fun little extra thing to do that makes people feel connected. Make sure you're always introducing anybody new and go overboard with it, I think, at this time, because people aren't able to connect it the way they were. So we have to make sure that people feel connected and supported within our framework. Experience leads to engagement. You know, it's really important to think about. I think it's important to think, it's always important to think about engagement, right? But really I want you to start thinking about how our people, is the experience what it should be? Because if the experience is what it should be, you're gonna get that engagement. You're gonna get it, that leads to it. So stop thinking so much engagement, start thinking experience. What kind of experience am I providing every day to the people that we serve? Another way to share experience is helping people learn the way they want to learn. And, we actually offer a checkerboard approach at RedPeak, where it's basically about, we want you to expand your role, whatever that looks like, right? Doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional career path, but we want you to expand your role. And in some companies, people can't expand. They can't go up the career path very quickly. There might not be that opportunity. So maybe it's about helping people expand their role. I want you to learn this now. I want you to learn how to do this now, because that's going to help you expand your role and be a more well-rounded team member. Some of the experience tools that you can utilize are things called Threads Culture. We use that as performance management. I recommend Amplify for surveys. Office Vibe does these little pulse surveys that I love, that are just like smiley faces, how you feeling today stuff. I love that. 80% of existing associates say that they'd prefer new perks or benefits over a pay raise. So maybe it's not so much about pay raises as it is about how can we meet the needs of what the people in this culture need right now. How can we meet that cultural need? One of the things that we just recently did is, after doing a survey with all our people, it came back that they're really tired and that rest is an issue, and that makes total sense. I think the thing to remember today is that people have literally, over the last 5 months, it's almost like we've upended everything, and everybody started a new job. We've changed the way that we've leased. We're changing the way that we're cleaning. We've changed the way we go into apartments. We're masking up. We've just got so much that's changed. And in that process, it's almost like starting a new job. So people are learning. Every one of us, anybody that I talk to, I know I've learned profoundly over the last 5 months. So we're learning, and when we learn, that takes energy. And so people were really feeling like they weren't rested. And so what we decided to do is RedPeak R&R. And so we do a surprise day every 6 months. And we announce it's RedPeak R&R time based on survey results. And every on-site team member has to take an extra day off within the next 3 weeks. And it's been very well received, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to give them more money. A lot of the times it's just answering that need and helping them through it. So diversity is a big subject right now, obviously. And one of the things that I think more important than anything is we hear diversity and inclusion. And I think I heard a really good quote not too long ago, and it was, exclusion registers in the brain as injury. When people feel excluded, it actually registers in your brain as injury. It hurts. And so if you are not working to include everyone, and just to give you a little example, one of the things that I always do when we have event planning, we'll plan an event, and I have this big committee, and they'll come in and be like, I think we should go bungee jumping. And I think we should do this. And I have a couple of team members, and I usually pick the most curmudgeon team members that I can think of, and the pickiest team members. And I'm like, so would this person be okay with that? And they get mad, and they're like, Lori. And I'm like, well, but we have to include, everyone needs to be included. We have to find something that everyone's going to get something out of. And so think about your inclusion efforts. Are you truly working to include every member of your organization in the things that you do for the team? And if not, change that. Think about that curmudgeon, that person that never wants to go to anything, that person that would just prefer to work out of their house for the rest of their lives and never see anybody again. How do we meet their needs? How do we do that? Family traditions, when I do Thanksgiving, that's a family tradition. And so in your company, if you want to create culture and you want to create that piece that's so elemental, you've got to create tradition within your organization. So think about a couple traditions, for example, right now that are important in your family that you just don't miss, right? Has to be that important there. What is sacred to your organization? What is sacred? And we ask ourselves that every single year. What is sacred? And is it still sacred? Some traditions could be dressing up for every single home opener day. We have a team stone at RedPeak. And one of the things that we do with our team stones is we We present them to people at the end of their first year because we feel like the first year is the hardest. And believe it or not, people get really excited about it. And you get your name on it and when you started, and it's quite impressive, you know. And so that's a tradition that we will never veer from. Camden, for example, does shared sick time, right? That's something that they've decided is a tradition and is sacred to them. We have a screen in our office that just shows our families. And so I can tell you that when I go into our office and I sit down and there's my 15-year-old kid that is in the middle of a meeting with me, it makes me feel like this is my family and my family is here with me. Internal messaging is really important. And, you know, you have to be cognizant and diligent in the internal messaging you offer your organization. It's important to keep people up to date, particularly now. I mean, I know companies right now that have been, you know, weekly with their people, talking them through things and offering that support. But some of the other internal messaging are some of the things we found that we used to do this newsletter called The Peak, and it kind of died out because it was a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. It was a lot of work. And, you know, recently somebody said, well, whatever happened to The Peak? And all these people are like, I so miss The Peak. I want to see The Peak again. So we're going to do the newsletter again because that's what people respond to and that's what they want. So think about the internal messaging, the messaging that people see every day, the little notes, right? Whatever it is that you can reinforce your culture with and bring people together with. So some of the things that you can do are the pulse checks, you know, the weekly Zoom calls. You can do an all hands on deck meeting. That's kind of fun, right? Like we're just like everybody all hands on deck Monday morning. We need to check in with everybody. And then please remember that people do bring their crap to the office. They have to. Right now they have children at home that they're trying to care for and homeschool. We have one guy at my office who literally put his child in a Spanish immersion school and now has to teach him Spanish and doesn't know Spanish. I mean, it's funny, but it's so horrific at the same time that it's insane. And we have no idea what people are going through, and they're doing their best, right? So everybody has a story, and everybody is dealing with something that to anybody else would seem profound. You know, empathy is obvious today, but empathy is also obvious post-COVID. We have to be empathetic to each other. And if all else fails, focus on the people. Focus on the people, okay? Everything else is going to fall into place. Focus on those culture carriers. Who's carrying that culture for you? Who's contributing? Focus on helping people understand their contributions to the culture. Utilize the talents within your organization. And then, whoops, I think I did this wrong. Whoops, sorry. And work on those triple T's. So in summary, and you can take a little picture of this if you'd like, culture is indispensable to company success. It needs to be well defined and we need to communicate it. Perfect your plan and make sure you're aligning expectations to reality. And that's really important. What we saying we want to do the same as what we're going to do. No fluff. Tradition is important to family, okay? Tradition is important to family, and your work family is just as important. And focus on the experience. Stop worrying about engagement. Focus on the experience. And I wish you nothing but the best in your cultural endeavors. If you have questions on this, I'm always happy to talk culture because it's, as you can tell, I really feel strongly about it and I love it. I am open here for any questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, thank you so much for being with me today. And take it easy. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Lori. You always do such a great job. I don't know if anybody has questions. We can leave it open for just a few more seconds. Otherwise, we will go ahead and close it down. All right, well, I don't see anything coming in for anybody, but thank you so much, Lori, for your time.
Thank you. Have a good conference, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.